It doesn't work that powerfully for me. I also do dream journaling as a Jungian. I went through Jungian therapy. I put myself through Jungian therapy because I wanted to understand it, and I did a bunch of workshops on dream interpretation. And so I do dream journaling. I record my dreams. I try to trigger lucidity. I do some lucidity induction practices. I've done some active imagination. The Jungian stuff isn't that powerful for me. So that's why I typically don't recommend it to other people. It also doesn't have the same kind of scientific backing as some of the other stuff we've been talking about. But I do know from other people that it can be very, very powerful and work for some people quite strongly. So you might want to try it, basically. Yeah, you might want to try dream journaling as well. Just put that's a little bit more effective for me. You train yourself. So you put a journal by your bed and then a pen. And you train yourself when you wake up, before you even open your eyes, try to remember any dreams, immediately write them down. And then you can get a book on dream interpretation. I recommend George Slater's book, Bringing Dreams to Life, is a good book. And then you can start working with it that way. This is another way to get the symbolic function sort of going. And it seems to connect with ways in which your brain is trying to self-optimize. If you were to ask me what to speculate, what's going on in these sort of Jungian practices.
I just remembered to record, which was after the second book. What was the second one for the practice called again?
Imagine a Space of Freedom by Verena Cast. Dialogue between the ego and the unconscious.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I do have like 40 pages of notes on dream journaling and personal journal in like the 200s, but I've never been able to activate lucid dreaming, although I'm quite curious. Was there a particular method you used to success?
Not that great success. I had a lot of success earlier. Your ability to do this declines with age. So when I was doing this sort of in my 20s, I had a lot of success with it, and then I left it off because I didn't have the wisdom. I mean, the problem with lucid dreaming is if you don't have a lot of wisdom with it, you just basically do it, and you just make use of it in a completely narcissistic fashion, right? So now I've tried to return back with hopefully some more wisdom and some good inspiration on how it could potentially be used. I've had one clear lucid dream and several semi-lucid dreams. Doing the triggers, doing the reality checks throughout the day. It's very good. I'll recommend a book for you. Sorry, Connor, I wanted to get both to you. I recommend this. I actually did Jungian therapy with him, so I recommend this as a good book. So Bringing Dreams to Life by George Slater. And then on the lucid dreaming, I think this is a very good book. It's both in technique and also bringing wisdom and philosophical depth to lucid dreaming. Lucid Dreaming.
I am familiar with that one, although I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of garbage on lucid dreaming, but this one's pretty good. And then he also has a companion book, Tips for Lucid Dreaming, that you might want to take a look at.
Excellent, thank you. So another maybe not related question I was wondering was, how would you what's your take on gratitude and gratitude practice as it might relate to like wisdom and contemplation practice?
Yeah, no. I mean, there's some evidence that doing gratitude is important. So I have a practice I do so after I do my Tai Chi and my Fijin and my meditation and then into the Prajna practice, then I do a gratitude practice. So my gratitude practice is I have gratitude for the physical, because I don't make it. I emerge from it to participate and trust in it. I have gratitude for the vital, the living, the self-organizing, because I don't make it, but I emerge from it. And then the same thing with the intelligible, all the intelligibility structures, the patterns that make reality intelligible, same thing. And then the spiritual, all the aspects in which reality affords self-transcendence. So all these aspects of myself that I don't make, but I participate and emerge from, I give thanks for them every morning.
Excellent. There was also the agape. I was wondering if it's possible to have like agape toward oneself, especially in terms of people like getting into like the pure consciousness sort of thing. in which they see like all their mind and then potential and body as separate? Is it possible to have like genuine agape toward that in order to realize one's like positive potential or something?
I think so. I mean, it's an interesting question. So part of what you do in metta practice, METTA, the loving kindness, contemplative practice, you actually start by directing metta towards yourself. Now, the point isn't to feel good about yourself. It's not and that's why I don't like the Sharon Salzberg interpretation. But the point is to bring up how are you identifying with yourself? How are you identifying with your mind, with your body, with your roles, with your history? Like, right? How are you bringing that into awareness and to try and take a more agapic attitude towards it? That the way in which you're identifying with your mind and your body and your history is so that they may flourish and that meaning can be made within them. And I find that practice doable. I don't know if it goes as deep as you're asking to something like that you might be accessing in a pure consciousness event, but you always should start metta with directing metta towards yourself, because if you don't get that primary relationship to yourself, then extending metta towards other people becomes actually very difficult.
Yeah. And I would imagine maybe if you don't start with the self, then it might have some tint of like of the having mode, like trying to manipulate other external things in order to.
Yeah, for sure. And you'll also, if you don't deeply taste your own mind and what you're savoring and what you're spitting out, if you'll allow me to extend the metaphor, then you'll tend to project onto other people when you do the metta practice.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Another question was, what would you say the difference is between efficiency and resiliency versus assimilation and accommodation? Because it seems like efficiency is similar to assimilation, resiliency is similar to accommodation somehow.
I map them onto each other.
Oh, equivalent?
Yeah, I make them identity claims.
Okay.
So efficiency and resiliency are logistical terms, assimilation or accommodation are Piagetian terms, and I map them just as you explained. Yep.
Okay, got it. Cool. Another one, I just had an idea. It's not really a question. If you've ever thought of mapping the four kinds of knowing onto Aristotle's four causes. So like
no, I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting.
So like the material cause would be propositional knowledge, the efficient cause would be procedural knowledge, the formal would be perspectival, and the final would be participatory.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. I'll have to think about that. That's thought provoking. It's not. I don't want to just give you an off the top of my head response to that. That's interesting.
Right.
I'll think about that.
Yeah, I just thought I should throw that out because it came to me once.
No, that's a good idea. That's a nice connection.
And then I guess I did write a few other stuff about it. Like both the connections are kind of like the material and the efficient, and the propositional and procedural are both kind of tangible or empirical, whereas the formal and final and the perspectival and the participatory are like less tangible.
Yeah, that's right.
And then like the passive or potential ones would be material and formal, and then the actual or active ones would be propositional and or the active and actual ones would be efficient and final, and then procedural and participatory. So passive and potential would be material and formal, and propositional and perspectival. Yeah, that was all.
I'd have to think about that one. That one's a little bit more complex, but I like the idea about mapping them onto the kinds of causes. I want to think about that. I'm going to think about that a bit. Thank you.
Because I know it seems also like you were saying the after Descartes especially, the formal and final causes were kind of cut out from the knowledge and wisdom institutions in the West, and that would be somewhat similar to how the perspectival and participatory are kind of overlooked.
Yeah, there is a deep connection there. I think you're right. I don't quite know if it's an identity claim like you're claiming. I'm not saying it isn't. I don't know, but there's a deep connection. I think your insight, at least, is pointing towards that there's a deep connection between those two losses. Yes.
Oh, actually, a simpler one, I guess, would be: could Sati be actual memories of your experience of being in the being mode? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, insofar as those memories are not just semantically remembered, just propositionally remembered, or just episodically remembered, but to the degree to which they're reactivating, like what used to be called a Proustian memory. So Le Recherche à temps perdu by Proust, the remembrance of things past. He eats a madeleine and it triggers this whole. He relives an episode from his past. So I'm talking about a reliving kind of memory,
So
not just.
perspectival.
Yeah, it's perspectival and it's participatory. You become that 8-year-old person again, kind of
Yes.
thing, right? Right. So insofar as it's that kind of remembering, very much, I think so. Yes.
Because for me personally, I feel like generally the most reliable or somewhat reliable to the extent that I can remember sources of meaning, and maybe it's not so healthy because you can just like latch onto them, are like memories where I'm pretty sure I was deeply in the being mode, so I can kind of remember that and kind of like uh, keep it like a live option or viable to the degree that I remember it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because obviously your memory will distort depending on your current
Of
context
course.
and so on. So do you think like doing that kind of Proustian memory could keep it more accurate and like a
Yeah.
source of meaning?
I don't know if it would keep it more accurate. I think memory rewriting is going to happen regardless. But I mean, I don't know if the accuracy, the historical accuracy matters that much. I mean,
Right.
what all you need to be accurate is that you have a memory of something that was in the being mode, and it currently can trigger you back into the being mode.
Yeah.
That's sort of good. That's sort of good enough. As long as it's procedurally accurate in that way, even though it might not be propositionally accurate, then that seems to me perfectly fine. As long as you say, as long as you don't just become retrospective and nostalgic about getting into the being mode, that right, yeah, that you use those, but you try and get new ones, and you try and keep a diversity, so you don't get sort of getting sort of a kind of encoding specificity to those particular memories.
Yes. Um, so I guess this just came to me, but are you aware of any research on whether like the more you go over a memory, the more it becomes altered over time, such that like
Yes,
a
yeah.
memory.
Every time you remember something, you slightly alter it. Every time.
So in theory, like a memory just coming to you for the first time since it happened 10 years ago would in theory be more accurate than one you've gone over many times every few months,
That would
maybe?
be the case. That would be the case if memories were atomic and not deeply interconnected and related to each other, which they are.
Hmm.
So you might not have remembered that, but you've been rewriting all these other memories, and they're connecting and changing the ones that you're not directly remembering. Yeah, it's memory is not an accuracy machine. it's, it's
So,
it's it's a prediction machine. The point about memory is to help you predict the future, not to accurately remember the past.
and I agree that's the important thing about it. But I guess just out of curiosity, what would the optimal strategy be for keeping a memory accurate? Since it rewrites every time, but if you don't remember it, it'll just be new anyway after so long. I
So
wonder.
the thing to do is to use the extended cognition. I mean, so some of it when something's just happened to you, write it down, right? At that point, take a picture, right? Make a recording, and then when you try to remember it, maybe make a mnemonic about it. Subject some pattern that you notice some pattern about it, and try to remember the pattern in addition to just the memory. Things like that can help. Pay attention to the context in which the memory was initially formed.
Yep.
Record and try to remember the context. There's things you can do to stabilize the memory to some degree, as long as you understand that you're ultimately doomed, right? You're ultimately doomed. You can
Yep.
slow down the process, but you can't ever stop it.
So in response to Alexander Bard's critique in terms of the lack of like the utopic or phallic vision, you know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah, of course. I just talked to Alexander yesterday. Well,
Oh,
mostly
cool.
when you talk to Alexander, you mostly listen to him because he's very
Yeah.
shamanic and he just keeps talking. I mean, we have a great relationship and he's very, very affectionate and respectful towards me. So please understand that any debate that's going on between us is clearly between people who are. It's done in friendship. It's done in a joint project. It's not a competition or anything like that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I just thought there was some comment actually. It's not mine, but I wanted to expand on it. I think it was your video with Jordan Hall designing the religion that's not a religion, which I loved, by the way.
Okay.
Someone was saying that maybe the utopic vision or narrative could be just simply that process itself of awakening from the meaning crisis and designing. a religion of no religion. Like the narrative is already like it already has that foundation in some sense, rather than needing to create something further.
Yeah, I kind of think I wouldn't have a problem with that um, if the narrative doesn't work towards a teleological closure, if it's right, because I don't think there's a state like a an end state where, okay, now we've awakened from the meaning crisis and meaning is never going to be an issue for us ever again. That goes contra to everything I've argued,
Right.
right? So as long as it's not teleological, if the vision is, well, let's get out of the meaning crisis, that's fine. What I would I'm okay with that, basically, as saying that's the vision. Where Alexander, I hear him in my head right now, would criticize me, you're saying that's not a vision. In a vision, you have to see something. You have to describe where you're going, right? You have to describe what the promised land is like, right? Or, and so you have to tell me what it's going to look like, how we're going to organize ourselves individually and collectively once we're out of the meaning crisis. And that's an actual utopic vision. So in that sense, I don't offer one, and I don't think anybody should. So that's where Alexander and I differ. I acknowledge his point. There's a point, two main points he's made, and I acknowledge this again with him yesterday. There's a big gaping hole in my theory, and he drove a Freudian truck through it, which is, right, I've not integrated how sexuality is part of the meaning-making machinery, other than a vague sense of it having something to do with, attachment relationships. And I think that, and Jeff McDonald made a similar criticism in some of to me. He's a professor, friend of mine at U of T, of the work I do on meaning in life. So I think that's a very telling criticism. I don't quite know how to do it, address it, but I acknowledge it, and I'll have to do work on that going forward. And then Alexander has a more Freudian Marxist thing where he says, well, the sexuality has to be bound up into some sort of like a vision of something that's attracting us into the future. And so giving a procedural vision like what you just gave, getting out of the meaning crisis, isn't that our narrative? He would find that that's not sexy enough, if I can, right? It doesn't entice, it doesn't draw all the young men
Right.
into sailing over the horizon, and so in that sense, I also understand what he means, that there has to be a vision that makes it intelligible to people and also attractive to people to make sacrifice, I guess is what he's saying. And I sort of see that. The danger I have with that is, I mean, well, my arguments. I reject sort of metaphysical teleology, and which is often what has been used to justify these utopic visions. And I worry about the frame problem. All the unintended side effects when we make these visions have always overwhelmed them. Now, Alexander says, "Oh, but those were all bad fallacies. Those were all bad utopic visions." And the good one is, I'm not, I'm listening to him. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced on that point. So I'm very, very, see, the brain's a prediction machine. So it's nostalgic because it will prefer familiarity over anything, even over happiness. Or if it can pretend that it has certainty, then it will go utopic. And that's why I'm so afraid of both nostalgia and utopia, because they both seem to be, the prediction machinery, just leading us into inherent self-deception.
Right. I mean, for me personally, just like that video you did with Jordan Hall, that kind of designing a new religion of no religion, alongside the need for, which I agree with Bard to some extent, some sort of eco-utopia, not necessarily a explicit vision of how it'll work, but that being a general goal state, I think, for the world. That was already, I don't know, inspirational enough for me, but maybe I'm older than the young men he's talking about at this point.
Maybe. I mean, what Alexander came to at the end, and maybe this is the right answer, is like, I should just keep doing what I'm doing, and he should just keep doing what he's doing, and they're complementary to each other in a way that's valuable. And maybe that division of labor is a good way of trying to tackle that issue. So, yeah, perhaps.
Oh, I certainly agree that everyone has like their own specialization to contribute that they should focus on, and also that the work you're doing is in some sense should in some sense ground the vision. Like it should come first to make
Yeah.
sure there's not the self deception.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think rational problem formulation should always come first, and I've made
yeah,
arguments for that. I want to make sure that something's clear because I've been trying to put this out in the comments and in some of the discussion I've been having. Jordan and I aren't trying to found a religion, right? That's not what we're doing.
yeah.
People misunderstand the use of the term design features. We're talking about something we see emerging. We see these platforms like Rebel Wisdom, Future Thinkers. We see new psychotechnologies like the circling practices that I'm exploring. We see the rise of 4E, cognitive science, right? We see all these new emerging communities. And I'm in dialogue with a lot of these people where people are creating ecologies and practices and communities around them. All of this is happening and it's emerging and they're all influencing each other. We're trying to explicate that and say, okay, let's try and understand this and design it to solve the problem that we need to solve. We're not trying to found a religion. That's a horrific proposal. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let's see. Well, I guess one aspect that would prevent it from being a traditional religion would be some sort of mythological narrative, especially one that's supposedly grounded in, a metaphysical claim especially about a future state or something like that.
Yeah, and I don't want that. I do want symbolization. I'm working with Daniel Craig. He's working on creating like the Temple of Wisdom, as he's calling it, where theater and art, music are all people where people can come and try and symbolize meaning making and wisdom and overcoming the meaning crisis and trying to get people involved and engaged in that. I think that's very, very important to do. But yeah, not trying to create any kind of mythological metaphysics to legitimate the process. Instead, trying to ultimately make it rely on cognitive science as what grounds it and gives it its legitimacy. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I think that grounding is like the most important overall sort of base structure that makes your work really meaningful for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I mean, that's where I'm getting into some arguments with Jonathan Pageau and Paul Vanderklay, because they sort of think that it ultimately has to ground out a narrative, and I think it ultimately doesn't ground out a narrative. I think for us, yes, I agree that narrative is indispensable for us living existentially, but we don't need a mythological narrative to ground our ecology of practices. We don't. I don't think we do. I'm not convinced by that argument at all. In fact, I think the alternative is available to us, and it's already emerging. It's not even a sort of an abstract possibility. It's already emerging, right, in which people are generating these things without any kind of mythological metaphysics to legitimate it.
Yeah, I would imagine, though, the narrative helps both like cohere various groups and to help it scale, maybe like Paul Vanderklay talked about, by telling stories to younger generations.
Yeah, for
in
sure.
some sense. Yeah, I guess that's where I see their narrative role. But I take your point very clearly when you talked about the difference between personal indispensability versus metaphysical necessity of the narrative.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where I would draw the line.
And that goes back to the point where we were talking about earlier. Your symbols can become psychologically indispensable to you, right? But that doesn't mean that you should ever take them to be metaphysically necessary.
Yep. Well, I just noticed we're kind of like 15 minutes over the half hour, so I didn't want to keep you too long, but thank you. I have other stuff, but those were the main points. So.
Okay. Well, it was good to talk to you. I'm happy to talk to you again for like maybe half an hour in a month or two if you want. So let me know. I enjoyed talking to you, Connor.
Oh, that's awesome. I would love that.
It's good feedback for me. You ask good questions, and I find it helpful. It's good for me to talk to people who are studying my work carefully, because that feedback. Because I get a lot of and I don't mean this, I'm not condemning anybody when I say this, but I get a lot of superficial feedback, as you can imagine, like yay or nay kind of feedback. But getting people, I mean, I did that's why I really liked the. I don't know if you got to see it, but I did a live Q&A with future thinkers yesterday, and we uploaded it, and that was just wonderful. That was just wonderful. That kind of thing where lots of people ask me questions. That's really, really, really helpful. You might want to join that next time we do that.
Were there other people?
Yeah, there was other people. So I think you have to be a future thinkers first. Yeah, and then, but I don't know. But then you just, there was a bunch of them, and so it's interesting because you not only get to ask your question, you get to hear other people's questions, and so it's very rich. I find it very rich. So maybe consider that. You'd definitely be a welcome presence in that kind of thing, for sure.
And I'll continue submitting questions for your weekly Q&As. I enjoy those as well. I think last time's my question on comedy versus horror, you answered that one, so thank you for that.
No, and I'll try and note your questions when they come up on the monthly Q&A. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So looking forward to listening to that. And then I still haven't listened to your conversation with Jonathan Peugeot, so that's kind of like a dessert for me.
That's a good one. It's a really good one. And that conversation is also echoing a conversation. Mary Cohen and JP Morceau. I had a conversation with JP and I posed some very difficult questions for his theism. And then Mary and JP responded to it. I'm going to respond. All three of us are going to have a dialogue soon, and we're going to record it, which is really good.
Awesome.
But yeah, the one with Jonathan was addressing that. We came to some really interesting places. Anyways, you'll hear on the video he wants to have another one really soon again. That should be good.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to JP's as well. I definitely enjoy his talks with you as well. So I'll leave it there, and then. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, he's a great interlocutor.
So. Like I said, I'll try to sign up for the Future Thinkers thing in case one happens to that. A live Q&A again.
I've already committed. I committed on on video to doing another one of those for sure. So it's definitely going to happen.
Sweet. And then like you said, maybe. Well, let's see. If we wanted to do another one of these sometime in the next few months, what would be the best way to contact?
So a good time for me would be, because I'm going back to work in January, a good time for me would be reading week in February, which is usually the second or third week in February. Send me an email in like January, February, and we'll try and set up a time during reading week.
Sweet, that'd be perfect. Thank you for all your sharing of wisdom, John. I really enjoyed talking to you again.
Thank you, Connor, and I really appreciate having these conversations. Thank you very much.
Cool. Have an excellent rest of the year, and maybe we'll see you in February.
Enjoy your holidays.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye.